Before I start the video, I'd like to shout out Pyrocynical and Leadhead who inspired me to make this video. Please check out their channels and give them some love. I would also like to give credit to the channel Chris's Corner for providing the clip I'm going to use later in the video. And to Sergey Martinez Miro, sorry if I butchered that, for the footage of Nepal I'm using in the background. Now, I wouldn't call Far Cry 4 Ubisoft's magnum opus, and it definitely isn't their most critically acclaimed work. But I still find it to be a fun and enjoyable game after all these years. Something about mowing down dozens of karate soldiers with an MG42 and watching a rhino ram into an enemy truck is absolutely amazing. Man, the fun times I had with that game. And while previous and future additions to the series had similar or exactly the same gameplay, i.e. animals mauling enemies and really fun gunplay, the main advantage Far Cry 4 has over its contemporaries is its unique setting, appealing visual aesthetic, satisfying sound design, and overall more interesting take on the Far Cry formula. Now, I know most of those advantages aren't real selling points, but the last one is the real kicker. In previous Far Cry games, you didn't really have a whole lot of post-game content or DLC. It also drastically improved upon the main villain and 2 to 3 mini-bosses for which the main story future installments relied heavily on. The villains, like in previous games, are all as unlikable as possible, with a tiny hint of sympathetic backstory, but sadly are not as memorable as the Seed family in Far Cry 5. But that is an unfair comparison as the game came after it. With all games comes bugs, and Far Cry 4 has its fair share of game-breaking bugs. Want to wait for a game to load for 90 years? Well, now you can in Far Cry 4. This person seems to be having the time of his life.
Okay, this freaking loading screen for Far Cry 4 Xbox 360 has been going on loading for about 5 minutes now. Now, as you can see, it is at the very end of the freaking loading, yet it is not playing. I don't know what's going on.
In all seriousness though, Far Cry 4 has run fine for me except for the occasional run-in with an inescapable invisible barrier. Far Cry 4, for a 2014 game, still holds up in terms of its graphics and detail as well as gameplay, and while some of its aspects didn't age as well, the game in total has better visuals than another favorite Ubisoft game of mine which released 2 years later, Watch Dogs 2, which brings me to my next topic. How does Far Cry 4 hold up against the other Ubisoft titles? Well, that's a hard one to crack, as it both does and doesn't. In retrospect, I feel that is hundreds of times better than the games that came after it, that being Far Cry New Dawn, and maybe even better than Far Cry 5's in terms of visual aesthetic and setting. But as far as real-world accuracy goes, Far Cry 5 in its fictional Hope County, Montana, wins me over, as I've been to Montana IRL, and everything from the color of the sagebrush to the overall geography and geological formations such as river deltas and mountains are hundreds of times more accurate than how 4 depicted its fictional Nepal clone, Kyrat. When it comes to previous Ubisoft games, it doesn't seem to hold up to the legacy of Far Cry 2, or even 3 for that matter. Far Cry 2 felt like you were actually trying to survive as you fought malaria and African warlords, and compared to 2, you have slightly more upbeat take on the Far Cry formula, albeit a still dark one. You realize this as soon as you are forced to take a selfie with the main antagonist, Pagan Min, at the start of the game. Lighthearted doesn't always equal bad. I really think that because you can do a whole lot more with an upbeat but mature game series than a dark one, because you can touch upon things you couldn't normally do, like real-world references like in the original Fallout games, which were dark but equally humorous. And you can still be serious about the main story. In Far Cry 4 you have an amazing opening with Should I Stay or Should I Go by The Clash playing in the background, but is nonetheless serious about its story. The song is a subtle reference to the alternate ending in which you spend 15 minutes waiting for Pagan to return. A similar ending exists in Far Cry 5. In conclusion, Far Cry 4 may not be Ubisoft's best game, but it marks an end of an era in which Ubisoft didn't shamelessly plug microtransactions into their games and DLC was worth the money. I really think that Ubisoft should revisit Kyrat in the future, as it is one of my favorite locations in the Far Cry series. With Far Cry 6 on the way, I have high hopes for the future of the series, and hope that while Ubisoft continues to improve upon their games with each new installment, they do not forget where they came from. Thanks for watching, peace out, goodbye.